Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's C-O, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order.
When 9 hikers go missing in the Russian mountains in February, you think it's just a terrible accident. The Dyatlov Pass incident is anything but an ordinary hiking accident. With over 75 different theories as to what happened, nothing quite makes sense. Follow me down the rabbit hole to find out what happened to the hikers on Dyatlov Pass. Hi friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I am your host Dani, and today we are talking about the Dyatlov Pass incident. Before we get into it, I want to apologize for my voice. I have a little bit of a cold, but we're getting through it. Also, I want to thank Rachel for suggesting this. So it's been covered a bunch, but it's super interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and cover it too. Also, Rachel, I apologize. She requested this a while ago, and I remembered, but I didn't write it down, and so I decided to do it now because I didn't want to forget you, Rachel. I just forgot then. Here we are. So I'm doing the Dyatlov Pass incident for you. I've heard it covered true crime podcasts, also different like conspiracy podcasts or different things. But there's a lot of conspiracy theories around it. Yes, people die. Lots of conspiracies. I feel like a lot of conspiracy theories have people dying. So here we are. Let's get into it. A group of 9 experienced hikers were hiking in the Ural Mountains and met their untimely demise on February 1st and 2nd of 1959. Guys, okay, I need to start right now by saying I greatly apologize. If you are Russian, please correct me. These are Russian names. I'm going to do my absolute best in my absolutely American accent with no Russian background at all to pronounce these. But if I mess it up, well, you can just laugh at me later or send me a message and correct me. That's totally fine. But I'm going to do my best. That's all I can promise because, you know, there's some rough names here. I'm also going to use the hikers' first names instead of their last names because last names are way harder. First names are a little bit easier. And I'm going to say the first names the way I have heard them being said on different podcasts, different episodes of things, different places. That way, you can blame them and not me. Also, some of them like have kind of like nicknames, or like the girls, their names seem longer, but I'm going to use like their shorter names, like shorten their names because that's how I've heard it in other podcasts. So I'm going off that because I figure maybe they are more knowledgeable about Russian pronunciations than I am. So here we are. Also, a fun fact, I just want you to know that the Ural Mountains separate Europe and Asia. I don't know, I just wanted to add that in for funsies. The hikers were from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and they were mostly college students. There was one guy that kind of jumped in later. He wasn't a college student, but a lot of them were studying like economics and engineering and different things. I know Igor, who was the leader of the clan, it was his senior year, and his mom actually urged him to stay home and work on his thesis instead of leading this expedition, and he would have stayed alive if he listened to his mom, but he didn't. So the hikers were Igor Dyatlov, who was the leader, and he was 23. Then you have Yuri Doroshenko, who was 21. You have Ludmila, which I'm gonna refer to her as Luda throughout the whole episode. So it looks like her whole name is Ludmila Dubinina. Dubinina? That sounds pretty good. But I'm going to refer to her as Luda throughout the whole thing, just so I don't like mess up her whole name the whole time. And that's what I've heard her referred to as. She was 20 and she was a female. Then you have Georgy Krivonishenko. He was 23. Alexander Kolveov. He was 24. Then our other female is Zenaida. I'm going to refer to her as Zena throughout the episode. Komolgorova. And she was 22. Next is Rustam Slobodin at 23. Then we have Nikolai or Nicholas. I've seen it both ways. I'm going to call him Nick. Thibaut Brignoles. And he was 23. And the last guy is kind of interesting. So he was... I guess he's not technically the last guy. He was added late. His given name is Semyon. We call him Sasha throughout the episode. However, he was also at some point went by Alexander. His last name is Zolotaryov, and he was 38. And then you have Yuri Yudin, who is 21, and he actually left the expedition due to sickness. And we're going to get into that too. So this was supposed to be a skiing expedition, which it makes sense as to why it took place in January and February. And all the members of the groups were actually grade 2 hikers with ski tour experience. And they were going on this expedition to get qualified at their grade 3 certification, which was the highest certification in Russia at the time. And the grade 3 certification actually involved them hiking 300 kilometers or about like 190 miles. But they didn't just have to hike it. They also like cross country skied it. So they skied up a long way, and then they like stashed their skis where they could no longer ski, and they were just going to hike the rest. And then when they came down, grab their skis and then ski down the mountain and call it a day, right? Seems easy enough. They thought, 3 weeks, we're going to get the 190 miles, and then we're going to be qualified as grade 3, certified hikers and skiers. I'm surprised that, a lot of people know that they were experienced hikers and skiers, but not like this, like they were very experienced. So the group laid out their route and they had to submit it to the Sverdlovsk City Committee of Physical Culture and Sport, and the committee approved the route on January 23rd, and the group left that same day. But they had to take 2 trains and a bus and a truck to get to where they were going. So on January 25th, the group actually arrived in Ivdel by train. Then they took a bus and took a truck to Vizhay, which is the last village to the north. And then the group spent the night there, and the next day started their trek up the mountain. So on January 27th is when they actually started their trek up the mountain. They were supposed to be back around like the 12th of February-ish. Well, as stated above, on January 28th, so the next day after they started their trek, Yuri Yudin turned back from the trek because he had joint and knee pain. And he did have like pre-existing conditions, which would cause the trek to be really difficult on him anyways, to include like a congenital heart defect. But in Zena's diary entry or journal entry, she wrote that he was having like sciatic nerve pain. And so he just didn't think that this was going to be a really good idea for him to continue on. He didn't want to hold the group back either. So he just turned around and went home. Zena and Yuri had dated previously, and in a letter she wrote to a friend that was discovered months after the accident, she was nervous about going on this expedition with him because she had basically fallen in love with him on another expedition after he chased off a brown bear. And she was like, well, we were together, but we're not together anymore, but we are together going on this hike. And she was kind of nervous how like the dynamic would be. I mean, anytime you've been around an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, like you get it, like tensions can be high. So she was a little nervous. And Sasha, who was added to the group later, he was supposed to actually be on the expedition with another group, but for some reason, like, it just didn't work out. And that group, it sounds like, from all the research I didn't actually end up going on the expedition at all. So he joined up. He found Igor on the train and was like, hey, do you mind if I jump into your group and go on this expedition with you? And all the other members of the group were a little apprehensive to accept him, especially because he was so much older and he was a stranger and he was completely covered in tattoos that they didn't understand. And you have to remember that tattoos at this point were not very prominent. And one of the tattoos was just a string of letters that didn't make sense in any language. Just a bunch of letters, which, people right now in today's society, you see letters together and you have to try to make out what it means. Anyway, they didn't understand what these letters meant. Also, Sasha had served 4 years during World War II and had multiple names. Actually, after the World War II service, he kind of dropped off the face of the planet. Although he told Igor when he joined the group that he had experience on this mountain in particular, but also just hiking experience. That he was a very avid hiker and he was really good at this. But like I had mentioned earlier, he had gone by Alexander at some point, and he also didn't ever really, it sounds go by his given name, which was Semyon. The group had kept journals and took a bunch of pictures throughout their journey, which is why we actually have all the information that we have, because they laid it out for us, which was really great. So there was a local tribe called the Mansi tribe, and they actually laid out this trail. They had this trail going up this mountain, and the group was like, perfect, we're just going to take this Mansi trail, which was actually what everybody did when they went up this mountain. They just took the Mansi trail. And the Mansi tribe had also named the mountain the group was hiking to. It was called Ortorten, which translates to don't go there. So, if you were a little nervous about their hike, a little nervous about me covering this hike, well, the Mansi was literally hey, just don't go there. And they're a really warm and welcoming tribe, which is really important that you know that for later. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to mention it again, just so you know. So the group followed this trail all the way to this wooded valley area. And that's where the Mansi trail stopped. At this wooded valley on January 31st, they basically stashed a cache of surplus food and equipment, all the things that they didn't need, their skis. That's where they took their skis off. They left them there because they wouldn't need them past this moment. And all the extra stuff that they would need, their extra food and stuff, they were going to need on their way home to hike back down the mountain, because at this point it's taken them 4 days to get up here. So they left 4 days worth of food to get home with. So January 31st, they left all their food there. They left not all their food. They left extra food, extra supplies, extra equipment they don't need anymore. Because when Yudin left, or Yuri, I'm going to call him Yudin because his last name's easy to say, and also there's 2 Yuris. When Yudin left the group on the 28th, they had to break up whatever was in his pack that they needed for the group. They had to put it into everybody else's packs, which is very common. If you go on long hikes, everybody takes stuff for the whole group. So somebody might be carrying the first aid kits, and somebody else might be carrying multiple days worth of food for everybody, or whatever. They break it up, but everybody carries stuff for the whole group. It's not just their stuff.
Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndicCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndicCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndicCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndicCloud. Discreet delivery, top shelf products, all month long. Head over to IndicCloud.co/spring24. That's CO, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order. Summer is the season of hot temperatures, outdoor adventures, and refreshing water activities. Summer is also the season of rough on your feet, causing dry, cracked heels and toes. Introducing Babyfoot, the original exfoliation foot peel that contains 16 natural extracts formulated to remove dead skin cells in 3 easy steps. Apply the booties, relax for an hour, then wash your feet. In 14 days, you've got baby smooth skin and your feet have never been softer. Letting dead skin cells build up over time is hazardous to your foot health. Our professional-grade DIY products, like our original exfoliation foot peel, our men's foot peel, or our moisturizing mask, are some of the best foot care products on the market, created with your foot health in mind. Pamper yourself with a spa day from the comfort and convenience of your own home with Babyfoot. If you want a chemical-free, easy-to-use exfoliating process from the company that created the original foot peel, it's time to treat yourself to Babyfoot. Go to babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24 and get 20% off your first order with Babyfoot. That's babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24.
So they left a bunch of stuff that they didn't need. The wooded valley, like I said, was the end of the pre-laid out Manzi trail. After that, it was just like whatever Igor had set out for them to get to the top of the mountain and then get back down. The group continued hiking, and basically it seems like they were planning to go over this pass and then set up camp the next night on the other side. However, the weather was turning for the worst and was worsening with like snowstorms and visibility. Up until this point, they had like great weather. It was sunny, it was nice. I mean, it's still cold. It's still January, February in Siberia. So like still cold. However, now we're getting more snowstorms and the visibility is super low. And this weather actually caused the group to get off course to the west. And when the group realized what happened, they decided, let's just set up camp here. We're not going to hike back down into the wooded area, which was only about a mile away. They decided, you know what, let's not lose the altitude that we gained. Let's just set up camp here. And obviously the wooded area would have given them more coverage from the storms that they were enduring. But also, Yudin had said, he was quoted saying, quote, Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope, unquote. And remember, they're trying to get certified. So, doing these survival techniques is really important that they know what they're doing, because if they ever go by themselves or go just two people or whatever they're going to do in the future with this certification, or they're certifying other people in the future, they need to know how to do this properly. So, it's probably a combination of both, that he wanted the extra camping experience since now it's presented itself, and why lose the altitude? We'll just cross the pass here tomorrow. So that's on February 1. They set up camp at what is called I'm gonna butcher this name so bad, Kholat Syakhl. So there you go. After departing, Dyatlov told the sports club, who had given him and the group the approval to go on the expedition, that he would send a telegram when they returned. He initially thought that they would return on the 12th of February. However, when Yudin left the group, he told him, hey, we're going to be a few days longer than initially planned. Don't expect us back on the 12th. And also, the committee that he had submitted their plans to was nobody ever returns on the exact date that they say they will, unless they don't do the full thing. Most of the time, weather and different things impact the amount of time that it takes. So nobody really expected, when they didn't get a telegram on the 12th, they were probably fine, However, by the 20th of February, the group's families were you guys need to put a search together, go find our people. Where are our children? So the university was oh, absolutely. They got a bunch of students and teachers and different people to go and find the people, put a search party together, go find these hikers. And soon after the university put their search together, so did the local police and government. And they were yeah, we got these planes and helicopters, we'll join in your search. On February 26th, the search party found the campsite of the hikers, and they were completely disturbed. They first found the badly damaged tent near the Kholat Syakhl, where they had been camping after veering off course. And at that point, the Manzi tribe had named that little mountain area Dead Mountain. So that's really, really refreshing to hear that, You're yeah, I'm really glad that our hikers decided to go up to a mountain called Don't Go There and camp on Dead Mountain. These are just really, really ominous titles. So the rescuers were disturbed to find that the tent had actually been cut from the inside, and most of the hikers' shoes and like essential survival gear was actually still in the tent. So imagine that. You're like, hey, we're going to go look for these hikers. And then you find their tent, which was slightly covered in snow at this point, but the poles were still like upright. And their shoes and most of their survival gear was in the tent, to include like axes and different things. Terrifying. However, this is a tactic that is used when there is an avalanche in the area, but there wasn't an avalanche recorded that night, nor has there been an avalanche reported in the area for the last 60 years, because that particular side of the mountain isn't very steep. Typically, no avalanches. It's not known for avalanches in that area, but that is a tactic used. And if there was an avalanche that night, then the tent probably would have been more destroyed than just like having some snow on it. You have to imagine that this is like, 14 days after they said they were going to be home. So this is 25 days after they have set up camp there that they are finding the camp. So snow being on top of it makes sense. It's 25 days later. Along with all of that, the tent being cut from the inside, all their shoes being in there, not all their shoes, but a lot of shoes, a lot of survival gear, all that stuff being in the tent. They're like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. They found 9 sets of footprints leading away from the tent. However, the prints were made in like a calm, like normal walking manner, not in a running manner, not in a rushing manner, and just like a totally normal walking manner. Calm walking manner. One of the hikers were actually, that's why I said 8 to 9 sets. One of the hikers was deliberately stepping in another hiker's footprints, which is why, like, you can see that somebody else was stepping in there. So that's how there are 9 sets of footprints, but only 8 actual tracks. About 1.5 kilometers away, or 0.93 miles, was the forest's edge, right? Because that's where they stored all their stuff. And that's where they found the first 2 bodies. The remains of a small fire were there, and Georgi and Yuri's bodies were found. It appears basically that they died of hypothermia, and they were found in only their underwear and a shirt, so basically like their underdressings. They didn't have any shoes on, any socks, and their hands and feet were burnt, and their hands were basically like completely scratched up. But they were under this tree, and the tree's branches, like the lower branches, were broken off, as if the hikers were trying to climb the tree, which would account for, the scratches on their hands. And it is thought that they basically climbed the tree to look back at the campsite, or maybe whatever they were getting away from. Although another theory is that they just broke off the branches to make the fire, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have to imagine how cold it is in February in Siberia, and they're basically wearing nothing. It is important to note that other hikers were found with Georgi and Yuri's clothes on, so it is presumed that they died first, then the others grabbed their clothes to stay warm. So later on, when they find the other bodies, they're like, oh, those were not their clothes. Those were Georgi's and Yuri's. And so I don't think that they left the tent just in their underwear and their undershirts. I think that they left the tent and then the other kids put their clothes on to stay warm after they died. Next, Igor, Zina, and Rustam were found. And they were actually found in poses that suggest that they were on their way back to the tent and then died of hypothermia on their way. So they were on, like, basically in a straight line from the woods where, like, under the cedar where Georgi and Yuri were found, upwards towards the tent. And I'm going to see if I can find a picture. I'll post this on our Instagram so you can find it. There are very disturbing pictures of this event on the internet. I'm not going to post those on my Instagram. You can go find them if you want to. I will not post them. That's on you. Go do you. I've seen them. I mean, they're 1950s pictures, so you have to assume they're not the best quality. But anyway, yeah. So they were found in a straight line on their way up to the tent. Igor and Zina were found first. And they were basically just under the snow. Igor was found hugging a birch branch, which I thought was different, but also like maybe he was using it like as a walking stick to try to get back up. You have to assume that the wind and the snowstorms have not stopped, that it's still pretty windy. Zina was in a position that made it look like she was scrambling up the mountain when she died. And she actually had this bright red bruise on her side that looked as though she had gotten hit by a baton or maybe a birch branch. I mean, I put those puzzles together for you. I did not read that anywhere. There's nothing to suggest that Igor hit Xena with the stick. However, like, why would she have a bruise that looks like she was hit with a baton, potentially a stick? But also, why did Igor hit her with the stick? I don't know. And after they dug a little bit deeper, they found Rustem. He also had a fractured skull and bruises on his knuckles, as if he had gotten into a fight. So he died of hypothermia, but he also had the fractured skull and bruises on his knuckles. At this point, there were no signs of foul play, so they didn't really think much of the bruises, and like maybe they came from like climbing the tree. It's unknown. Rustem was the closest towards the tent. He was the closest when he died, which I actually find interesting that Igor died the closest to the trees where the other two were found, and then Xena and then Rustem. Like, to me, he was exposed to the elements. Anyway, I'm surprised that he got that far. Because of the conditions and the amount of snow that covered the ground, they couldn't uncover the other hikers until May. That's 3 months later. So what they would find then when they uncovered the other 4 hikers is still unexplainable. On May 4th, the remaining hikers were found in a ravine about 250 feet away from the tree where the first 2 hikers were found, buried under 13 feet of snow. The 4 hikers built themselves like a little shelter to protect them from the cold. And in an emergency, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. And they were experienced hikers, so they knew, like, hey, if I'm in an emergency, I'm supposed to build myself like a little snow den. So if I'm like not necessarily running from something, but if I'm caught out in the wilderness in snow, I'm supposed to build this den this shelter out of snow to keep myself nice and warm and protected. And there's 4 of them, and they built themselves this little snow shelter. So these hikers did not die of hypothermia like the others did. They died from extensive injuries. Let's start with Nick. So Nick's skull was cracked open. This was like a massive head wound. It wasn't like a little crack. It was like a huge impact to his skull, and that's what caused him to die. Alexander had a broken nose and injuries to his neck, like his neck had been broken. And potentially, like, the broken nose could be from Rustem, who had bruised knuckles. Maybe they got into a fight. I don't know. Luda's ribs were broken, but not just broken. Like, her whole chest cavity was compressed with severe internal bleeding. She was also found... This is going to get gruesome. I need to warn you guys. This is going to get gruesome here for a second. Skip ahead 15 seconds if you need to skip this part. She was found with her eyes plucked out of her head, and her tongue was missing. Sasha had 5 broken ribs, but they were all on the exact same side of his body. Like, they weren't 5 like random broken ribs. All 5, like, from the top to the down on his right side were broken. His eyes were also missing, and he was holding a pen and notepad, which is odd because he hadn't actually written anything down yet. And he was also found with a camera. However, like, the melting snow damaged the film. And in the report, the injuries were compared to a trauma that would have come from like a shockwave of a bomb. Luda and Alexander were found with radioactive material on their clothes. And it's hard to know exactly how much radioactive material because they were exposed to the snow and melting, and that would have washed away some of the radioactive material. Only 1 frame of the pictures taken on Sasha's camera was able to be rescued. It had this big light filling most of the frame and 3 dark shapes at the bottom that looked like the tops of people's heads. Could it be the 3 people he was found with? I mean, maybe. Or just damage to the film? However, there was a camera found in the tent with a picture on it that had this like bright streak of light in a dark background. Most of the pictures that they took during this last day were darker because of the weather, but these lights will bring up like more questions than answers in the end, because like, what were these lights? What was happening there? Anyway, Despite the evidence of foul play after finding the remaining hikers, the lead investigator closed the case on May 28th. He said that there was no signs of foul play and all their valuables were still intact, so everything's good. He said the cause of death was overwhelming force that the hikers were unable to overcome. However, Lev, who was the lead investigator, wanted to continue investigating because he was like, something's fishy about this. But he was called to Moscow and told by the higher ups that he was not allowed to continue. Basically, like, stop the investigation, close it. So I'm not sure he was the one that wanted to close it. I think that he was forced to close it. And so he was like, we'll just like write this in there. A lot of people blame him. Like, how could you just close the investigation? Like, what's wrong with you? Obviously, look at the evidence. But I think he closed it the way he did because he was told to by the government in Moscow. So, like, why? There's so many questions in this. I don't know. What happened? So here's some of the theories. So Sasha is already like a sketchy character because they're like, we don't know this guy. Like, he just like randomly found us on the train. He's got all these names. They did not know that at the time. I'm pretty sure. Anyway. So Sasha was one of only 2 hikers that had shoes on. And from the information I found, it sounds like he had both of his shoes on, but only one other hiker basically had only one shoe on. And everybody else either was just in socks or barefoot. So from knowing that, it seems like Sasha put his shoes on and is assumed to that he left the tent before they cut themselves out of the tent. So basically, he left the tent to go take pictures of whatever these lights were. And then the rest of the hikers ended up cutting the tent from the inside and escaping that way. But it seems like Sasha was already out of the tent before the rest of the hikers tried to escape it. And apparently, to take these pictures of the lights. If the recovered picture on the camera he had with him is this light that he was taking a picture of, none of the other hikers were with him yet. So then, like, the 3 dark heads, it almost looks like, they couldn't be the 3 other people that he was with in the den because they weren't with him yet. It's speculated that Sasha was actually some sort of spy and the Russian military was conducting experiments in the area and saw Sasha taking pictures and wanted to stop the pictures from getting out. And the missing tongue and eyes were signs that you don't say anything, you don't see anything. But if this theory is correct, then why isn't Sasha's tongue the one that was taken out? Instead, it was Luda. Which actually, Luda has the most extensive injuries out of anybody. She's got the crushed chest cavity, like completely crushed chest cavity, like really crushed. And she's got the tongue that's missing and the eyes that are missing. Like, she was fucked up. Excuse my language, but like, wow. You know? And so if Sasha really was a spy and the military is like trying to stop him from taking pictures, which is like a weird theory, then why wouldn't they take his tongue out? Like, as a sign, like, hey, don't say anything, you know? And also, why would they only kill the 4 people that they found in this den and not the others? I don't know. The others just died of hypothermia. They were like, hey, we took this girl's tongue out, so like, just you heed that warning. It's very weird. And there were other hikers on the mountain that night, like, that weren't part of this group, like other hikers just like in the area that say that they also saw bright lights in the sky. One of them compared it to like a rocket. One of them compared it to just different things, like lightning maybe. But there was a lot of people in the area that night that said, hey, yeah, we saw lights too. So how come this group was like being held accountable for taking pictures of this light, but the other group was like, I mean, we saw lights too. It's weird. Also, there was no tracks besides these hikers' tracks found. So I guess like the military could have covered up their own tracks, but it's just weird. Another theory is that a Yeti killed the hikers, although again, there's no tracks found. So like no animal tracks, no human tracks, nothing. So it's just weird that like maybe I guess a Yeti, but like a Yeti wouldn't have covered its tracks up. And maybe a Yeti would have eaten the people. I don't know much about Yetis. So, anyway. Remember that Rustem had bruised knuckles and Alexander had a broken nose. So the two of them could have gotten into a fight. And this is kind of like my own theory. Like, and it doesn't explain everything. It's just like a little thought I had. But like, what were they fighting over? Were they fighting over like, because some of them were headed back to the tent and some of them were in a shelter. So were they fighting over the fact maybe they should go back to the tent? Maybe they should just build a shelter here. Like, were they so scared that they were gonna fight about it? And then Rustem was like, no, man, I'm going back to the tent, and punched Alexander in the face. Maybe Alexander tried to stop him. I don't know. This is just a thought that I had about the broken nose and bruised knuckles scenario. But what would cause the group to leave the tent with hardly any of their warm clothes on and no survival gear? They didn't have axes. They didn't have their knives. They didn't have anything. And then, like, they walk so calmly from the tent down to the woods. And granted, like, it could have been really bad conditions still. It's just weird. It's just like weird coincidences here. So the Mansi tribe has been a theory that maybe they killed the hikers, but they were like a welcoming tribe and they were known to be really friendly. They also helped with the search and rescue of the hikers. It just seems unlikely that they would be so friendly and then follow the hikers up the mountain and they would kill them. You know, like, and they've helped many hiking groups throughout the years. It's not like this is the first hiking group that hiked this mountain, right? Like, why kill this group of hikers? It's just like the Mansi tribe seems like a very flimsy theory here. Yes, they live there. However, they're very welcoming to the people that come to hike there. It just seems not likely. So, of course, you have the alien theory, which, you know, like, the bright lights could have been a UFO. The radiation can be caused by aliens, that's been said. And that could account for the missing eyes and tongue and the fact that there were multiple head and chest injuries throughout the group. I mean, I still have the question as to why they walked with such a calm manner from the tent to the woods, almost a mile away. Maybe the weather was so severe that they couldn't see very well, but they didn't have clothes or shoes. Like, to me, if I'm freezing and I have to, like, get away from something severe, I would be running. And, I mean, I guess I've never been in an avalanche situation. It's just very odd that you're not wearing very warm clothes, you've left all your survival gear, and you're walking in a calm manner down to the woods. Where supposedly they stashed this stuff, but they don't have, like, they didn't find their stuff that they stashed there. I don't know. I did find that piece of information on Wikipedia, so that could just be, like, nonsense, you know? Anyway, something made them nervous enough to cut the tent open instead of going through the opening, leave without shoes. And granted, it does take a while to get your, like, you know, your good boots on to walk through the snow. But, like, grab a jacket. That doesn't take very long. Throw a jacket on. Luda was found face down. So some say with her face, like, in water, like in running water. So they say that, like, the missing eyes, the missing soft tissue, so the eyes and the tongue, could just be decomposition that happened over time. It doesn't seem plausible to me, but okay. A katabatic wind could have caused this because in Sweden, a katabatic wind did cause the death of some hikers. So this is basically like a downward wind that catches the gravity and goes a little bit, like, faster. So it could cause the hikers to think maybe an avalanche was coming. And these are basically like hurricane wind gusts. And the wind, you know, it could have caused the Snowden to collapse, which could cause the injuries from the crush injuries and the skull fractures. But they were really extreme, like really extreme. So I don't know. There have also been theories that maybe these crush injuries or these injuries happened, the skull and the chest happened post-mortem, but then how did they die? It's been proven that they didn't die of hypothermia, they died from their injuries. So then that doesn't make sense at all. However, in 2019, the government decided, let's go ahead and reopen this case so we can just answer everybody's questions once and for all, get it all out of the way, you know? However, there's 75 different, like, theories out there of what could have happened. And they decided, you know, we're only going to investigate 3 possible scenarios. A lot of people believe that it was the government. There was a lot of military testing in the area. And so people are like, yeah, it's definitely the government. You're in the height of the Cold War. They're testing bombs, potentially. That could be where the radiation came from. But also only 2 people had radiation on their clothes. It's just weird. So they decided to go ahead and investigate 3 possible scenarios, being avalanche, snow slab, and hurricane. Yeah, okay. So the avalanche theory. Typically, people that are swept away in an avalanche die of asphyxiation from being trapped in the snow. There is a rare type of avalanche called a slab avalanche, which has been proven to be able to cause such intense injuries. And the slab avalanche is when like the weaker layer of snow is under a stronger layer, and then that weaker layer basically like breaks off and causes an avalanche. Although this explanation doesn't explain why the hikers left the tent in such little clothing, and why some then decided to make a fire, some decided to attempt to get back to the tent, others decided to make the snow shelter. It's just like, if there's an avalanche coming, wouldn't they move faster, try to get in, basically like try to take cover somewhere else? And also, that doesn't explain why there's just not that much snow on top of the tent. Like there's just hardly any snow on top of the tent, like just enough snow that had fallen in the 25 days since they had left it. A snow slab is basically like an avalanche, but instead of when an avalanche falls off the side of a mountain, it starts as a slab, but it like breaks up into smaller pieces and goes down that way. Whereas a snow slab stays in one solid like slab piece and goes down the mountain in a slab. So either way, like an avalanche or a snow slab would have caused more damage to the tent. And also, the hikers would have been found under much more snow. You had the 4 hikers that were severely injured. They were found under 13 feet of snow, but they also built themselves like a little shelter out of the snow. Whereas the other hikers were basically found right under a layer of snow. And a hurricane just doesn't make any sense at all, because this mountain is 500 miles away from any water source. And that's like a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico causing the death of people in Kansas. Which, like, maybe it was a huge hurricane, but how come that same huge hurricane didn't ravage basically everybody else between the water and the 500 miles to the mountains? It's just, like, this is a just dumb theory. However, the idea that the government was involved at all is, quote, absolutely out of the question. So leave it to Russia to be like, no way. We for sure, like, it wasn't us. No way. Like, I'm surprised they let any of this information even get out, because they love to cover things up. However, here's some other interesting things I found in my research. I didn't know where to add it, so I just like put it all at the end, so you guys just like have these cute little tidbits. The pass the hikers were going through was previously unnamed, and it actually got its name from the group. So Igor Dyatlov Pass. It was named after him. The guy who initially found the campsite and the tent found a flashlight on top of one of the poles that held up the tent, like one of those little, tent posts, and it still worked, which kind of, in my opinion, also takes away the hurricane, snow slab, avalanche theory, because if this flashlight's still on top of this tent, then, like, obviously the winds aren't that bad, the snow's not that bad. This is 25 days after these hikers left their campsite is that he found this flashlight. So it's just odd, right? Like, what were they running from? I really like the alien theory. I really like it. I think that one like holds up the best in my mind. But you can have whatever theory you want. I have one more little interesting fact before I let you go, though. Igor's sister was interviewed. Her name was Tatiana, or Tatiana, however you like to say it, and said that she was actually unable to attend the funeral of her brother, but recalls her mom saying that she only recognized Igor because of the gap in his teeth, and that his hair was completely gray. So, like, what kind of snow impact causes your hair to turn gray? I don't know. Maybe that is a phenomenon. I just don't know about it. If it is, please send me a message and like educate me, because I'm completely baffled by the fact that his hair is gray. It wasn't gray when he left for this expedition, and now it's gray. Whatever. Anyway, thank you, Rachel, for suggesting this. I definitely fell down a rabbit hole with this one. I went all over the internet trying to figure out what the heck actually happened to these hikers. All these explanations that they're trying to come up with now that science proves what happened. I don't think it does. I just don't think it does. So, what do you guys think? Which theory do you like the best? Do you have your own theory as to what happened? Maybe Yetis are really smart and do cover their tracks. Maybe Yetis just kill people and they don't actually eat people. I don't know. I'm just like throwing ideas out here. I want to hear what you think. Send it to me. DM me. If you guys did not see my Instagram story, if you have left me a rating or review, please send me a message so I can send you a thank you sticker. If you've shared my podcast on your social medias, tag me in it so I can send you a t-shirt for that. I want to thank you. This goes on forever and ever and ever. Like until my podcast is no longer. Please, every time you put a rating or review, I'm going to send you a sticker with a little thank you note. I have seen that I have a bunch of ratings now, and I don't know who did it. I can't thank you if you don't send it to me, so please send it to me so I can thank you. Until next time, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all next week. I appreciate you. Have a good week. The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Dani Mercy. We thrive on listeners like you. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating or review wherever you are listening. Follow us on Instagram at rabbit.holepodcast. Special thank you to Zakar Valaha Music for our intro.